Hey everyone, Derek here from WayScript. In this one, let's talk about how we can write a CSV document using SQL data. What we'll use is an HTTP endpoint that we can pass on a query parameter to write custom CSV. Let's see how we can do that using WayScript. Starting out, we'll go to the WayScript platform. What we're trying to do is to set up an endpoint that we can pass a query parameter to do a certain conditional select on an SQL database. That sounds like a lot, but let's break it down into a few pieces. We'll start off with that HTTP trigger. What this will do is give us a URL that we can request a query parameter to. We'll call this query parameter something like SQL selection. And what this will do once we click off of typing this is we'll create a variable down here in the bottom left. Now, when we go to this URL that we're given, we can pass a value for that query parameter that we can use throughout the rest of our WayScript program. We can use that parameter to query our SQL database. We can click on Add Step and choose an SQL module. From here, if we've already connected our database, we can select it from the ones we've connected. If not, we can choose Add an account. I'll be using this one that I've already connected. Then we can edit code and then write our own custom SQL right in our browser. For me, I'll write a few lines of SQL code and I'll execute it so we can see the data that we're working with. Once we execute it, we see that I have a table called sample table that we can use a where statement on to conditionally pull information. Let's say I have a column called employee role, and we can set this value equal to that query parameter value that we're getting from that URL that we created with the trigger. So now when we run this, we should get back no result because we don't have a value for this SQL selection yet. But when we go to that HTTP endpoint, we should have a value in this variable called SQL selection. Now we'll click on Done Editing. So let's test this out and make sure it works. We'll turn on this HTTP trigger, and then let's copy this and we'll paste it and pass in that query parameter. So we'll say SQL selection, and then let's set this equal to marketing. We should get a 406 because we're not returning anything. But now we see that our SQL selection is marketing and our SQL table should have been queried using that. So we conditionally selected this entry in our SQL table from this column, marketing. So let's import marketing. We'll import this number and then we'll import this last column. Once we have all of these, we can create a loop because we might have more than just one, and then write this to a CSV document. We'll loop over each of those columns. So column 1, column 2, and then column 3. And all we're doing here is we're predicting that we may have a list value generated from our SQL table that we're querying, iterating over those values, and then we'll write them to a CSV one by one. What we may want to do is add to a file, or we could replace. In this example, I'll replace the file each time someone goes to that URL. Then we'll add 3 columns. And just like that, we're writing to a CSV SQL information dynamically by using an HTTP trigger. Finally, I'll just include a final CSV to read a file so we can come back and see it. All right, let's test it out. We'll go back to that URL. And this time, instead of marketing, let's say developer. We're still not returning anything to that URL, but we know that we're running an execution of our program here. Now, when we click on this last CSV, we see that our SQL CSV selection.csv now has this information in it.